Hey folks, Dust here, and I wanted to discuss the quarterfinals for the FACEIT Major, which is coming up here very soon. I haven't done any content in a while, so I thought I would do this. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, so my voice might sound a bit weird, and I didn't want to put the webcam on, but I'll put some images up. And we'll just talk through these matches. I'm going to do this in two parts, so this video is going to focus on the first day of quarterfinals matches, which will be Big versus Navi, and Complexity versus MIBR. And then I'll do a part 2 video the day after I release this one, which will focus on Liquid versus Hellraisers and Astralis versus FaZe. So now that I've got all that shit out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into it, and we'll start by talking about Big. So for each team, I'll follow a format of talking about what they did coming into the major, what they've done at the major so far, some thoughts on their players' performances, a little bit of talk about their map pool and tactics, and then I'll jump into some thoughts about the head-to-head. So with Big, coming into the major, they obviously had some real hype around them because of the ESL1 Cologne run they had, where on home soil they were able to reach the finals. This included winning some best-of-3s against G2 and FaZe in the quarters and semifinals of that tournament, as well as in the group stage getting some revenge against Liquid, who had given them a lot of problems at Belo Horizonte, and they also got a win against Renegades and MIBR in best-of-3 series. So a really, really good run there. Wound up losing to Navi, though, in the finals in a best-of-5, 1-3. But still a really big run. And after that, essentially nothing. Like, there was a 2-month break between then and now, so didn't really know what to expect. And then, of course, prior to Cologne, if you go back earlier in the year, had some tougher times. Didn't do so hot in their LAN debut at Belo Horizonte, getting knocked out in the groups by Liquid. The only one they got was against that Brazilian NTC team, which we all know how much they shit the bed. So there was a whole lot of credit to be gained there. They were able to get back into EPL, at least, with kind of the core of their lineup after being relegated in the previous season. And then prior to that, if you look at 2017 with their core 3, just really not a whole lot went well for them other than, you know, doing well at the PGL Krakow Major and doing okay at some DreamHack Open events like Denver kind of late in the year and then Leipzig at the very beginning of the year. But really a whole lot of issues outside of that, and that's why you've seen them make roster changes, losing guys like Kiev, putting Legia to a coach, and bringing in people like Tizian and Smuya. Now, going into the majors so far, they obviously struggled a little bit to get out of the challenger stage. I mean, they won their opening game against Renegades, but then were one of the victims to Vega Squadron, who was tearing shit up in the challenger stage somehow, which I don't fucking understand. And then they wound up losing the Complexity as well, so they were on the verge of elimination. They were able to win against Gambit on Nuke, get into a best-of-3 against Optic, and 2-0 that series to move on to the Legend stage. At the Legend stage, they were able to beat FaZe, Tyloo in the opening 2 games, and then lost to coL in a pretty big way, but then bounce back with the win against Hellraisers, and that's how they find themselves in the playoffs. As far as how the players have been doing, I mean, Smuya has been just banging shit out at this major. He's the highest rated player from the Legend stage. He's number 2 in KD difference, right under Issa. He's number 1 in ADR, number 1 in op kills per round, number 4 in opening kills per round, and number 5 in total op kills. He has had pretty much 20 plus kills in every game he's played, except for a couple of the challenger stage games, but just a monster for the most part for this team. Really one of the driving forces behind the firepower this team has in this major thus far. Nex and Tabson have also been pretty solid throughout this event. Nex had a few off games, but he's mostly been good, and in general, he's really picked up form ever since the MDL Global Challenge earlier this year, and going into events like Belo Horizonte and Cologne, playing some of the best Counter-Strike he's really played since maybe some of his peak performances in mouse sports back in like 2015 or something like that. Always been a player that was really good in early stages of tournaments and against smaller teams, but now he seems to be able to do it in deeper parts of tournaments against bigger name teams. So that's really good for this team. And then, yeah, Tabson has just been really solid for this team for quite some time. He's had a couple of moments of, you know, having issues, but for the most part, been really good. And I think what's been most surprising about Big's player performances is that Tizian and Gabi have even played really well. You know, Tizian had a bit of a rocky start the first couple of games in the challenger stage, but did really well versus Gambit and Optic. He did really well against FaZe and Tyloo in the Legend stage, so definitely cool to see him doing well. Certainly he had a little bit of a rougher time against some Complexity and Hellraisers in the closing 2 games Legend stage, but he's still done his part and not been a liability. Definitely been an upgrade in fragging when you compare to some of the issues that Legia had. And then when you go to Gabi, he's even had some pretty damn good numbers at this major, which kind of blew me away. Did really well in the Challenger stage, and he's done fine throughout the Legend stage. Now, will this form hold up against a team like Navi? That's going to be one of the biggest questions that have to be answered to see if they have any chance at pulling it off against Navi and getting the big upset and trying to go deeper than top 8 this time around at a major. That's, you know, the biggest thing to keep an eye on, I think. I imagine Smoothie and Nex and Tadzin will still play really well, but will they be as good? I mean, we just talked about how Smoothie has been topping the charts in all these different categories. Can that hold up? And I just don't know if I can expect Tizzy and Gabi to hold their form. But what is really good is that at least all 5 of their players are playing at least pretty well, which can't be said for some of the guys over at Na'Vi. Now, when it comes to talking about their map pool, definitely seem to have a really strong Dust 2, so that's something to really think about. And then they play most of the other maps a bit, but they only have like a slight win rate on those maps, and then they have a slight loss rate on Inferno. If loss rate's even a word, I don't know. Again, I'm ill. Bear with me here. I'm still trying to do something for you guys. So I would say that Dust 2 is definitely their leading map, and then they're pretty good on Cache, okay on Nuke, okay on Overpass, okay on Train, and then their Inferno is a little bit iffy. So they have a pretty widespread pool, and this is a team that's always varied up their bans and picks a good bit, not really cut and dry like other teams. We know exactly what they're going to be going for in bans and picks, which makes this team kind of fun to watch in ban pick scenarios. Tactically speaking, you know, a Gabi run team is always going to be really fun for executes, and being able to play default's fine. I think it's great that on this iteration of the lineup, Tabson's more of an entry, second entry type player, so they're really leveraging his rifling skills to help open up rounds alongside Smia's AWP. And then you have Nex, who can be kind of a versatile player. He's always been kind of a peripheral player, but on this team, he can sometimes get in the mix trade fragging on executes, and he's been playing really well. So they definitely have a pretty good driving force. Tizian does his job as a support. Same with Gabi, kind of being a support / sacrificial entry fragger at times. And what's really neat about this team is outside of Astralis, I feel like they're one of the teams that have been really creative with grenades, especially HE grenade stacks. Some of their nade sets on retakes are so freaking good. Like, I think there was a video that was made about their retake on B on Dust 2 and the nade set they used to do that in a couple of games. So they just have all these kind of tricky things that they can do. Obviously, they're known for gimmicks like Inferno at the PGL coL Major and things like that. So you never know what they might pull out. They're a very creative team, but definitely in general, pretty tactically sound. So now let's move on to their opponent, Na'Vi, which has been top 3 in the world for quite some time, currently ranked number 2. Had a tougher time at DreamHack Marseille coming into this event, losing to North in the quarterfinals, who went on to win the whole event somehow. Obviously didn't repeat that at all at the Major, but that's a story for a different time. And then, you know, outside of that, though, really strong team. Top 4 placing at E-League Premier, being able to beat teams like Fnatic and Mousesports, but losing to Team Liquid in the semifinals, which has been one of the teams that have given them some trouble outside of Astralis. Then they had a really big run at Cologne, obviously winning that event, including beating Astralis in the best of 3, as well as beating Fnatic and Big to take home that trophy. They also took first at the Starlighter Season 5 finals, where they beat teams like the SK lineup that was, you know, before MIBR, then beating Mousesports and beating Energy. They also did top 4 at the EPL Season 7 finals, where they beat FaZe in a best of 3, but lost to Team Liquid again in the semifinals. So again, showing some weakness against Team Liquid a little bit there. And then, you know, they've had some other good top 4 finishes, second place finishes at like DreamHack Masters Marseille, Starlighter Season 4, and, you know, the top 4 at E-League Boston, a team that's, again, been one of the few teams that can seem to challenge Astralis and beat them in best of 3s, as well as be able to get wins over FaZe. Very, very good results coming into this event, is the point, outside of a couple of mishaps, you know, particularly, you know, the last DreamHack Masters event they attended right before they came into this. So far at the Major, they had probably one of the roughest openings you could ever ask for. They had to play Astralis first, which they only lost to narrowly in a 14-16 game. They then were able to beat FaZe on Overpass, and then went out from that point forward, beating NIP and Fnatic to make it to the playoffs. As far as player performance goes, Electronic and Simple are the number 2 and number 3 rated players in the Legend stage. Flamey is also playing solid, as one might expect. Electronic and Simple have also been in the top 5 on some different categories, you know, on the stats leaderboard. Edward, though, is in the bottom 5 in rating for the Legend stage, so that has definitely been a weak point for the team, and typically you're not going to expect Zeus to put up big numbers either. And so I guess when I'm bringing this up, it's like, obviously you expect Simple and Electronic to probably be one of the best players on the server. Maybe Smoothie and Tabson, though, are going to give them a run for their money based on the form they've been having throughout this Major so far, if they keep up that form. But then once you get to like the bottom 3 players, I think Flamey will probably edge out someone from Big. But I don't know, because Nex has been playing pretty well, actually. So if you match those two up, they might go head-to-head. It's really the bottom two players. I feel like Tizian and Gabi have outperformed Zeus and Edward. And so you have to kind of wonder how much of a difference that's going to make in a head-to-head matchup. But then going back to Navi a little bit here in the map pool, you know, Navi has got one of the deepest map pools in the scene outside of Astralis and maybe FaZe. And we'll have to kind of see what MIBR is bringing to the table as they play together more. But certainly you'd expect them to have a pretty deep map pool once they figure things out. Navi are one of the best teams in the world on Overpass and Train. I would say Astralis is probably the best on Overpass, but Navi's played a lot more Train than Astralis has, so you might give Navi the nod as best Train team, but certainly they're top 2, top 3 team in the world on Overpass and Train. They also have a really solid Mirage and Nuke. They're a little bit iffy on Inferno, but they've played it a lot. It's probably their most played map, and they still do get a fair amount of wins on it. Definitely have a positive ratio on the map. And they have no offline wins on Cash and generally don't play it. And they're 0-6 offline on Dust 2. So those two maps, Cash and Dust 2, seem to be the weaker points. When you talk about Navi tactically, they've done a really good job at making Electronic more active in recent times. Even if he plays peripheral roles like, say, B on Overpass, he's very active when they do executes on B, kind of entering into that B bomb site. It's actually been one of the main reasons why their Overpass has been so good, I feel like, is because of Electronic's impact on the B side of the map on T side. Also can be very active on taking banana control on T side and Inferno. They've shifted him to being more of a mid-focus on Mirage and being more of a guy kind of being a trade fragger on that map. So just getting Electronic more involved in leveraging his star power to get openings has been really big for this team next to Simple's AWP. They also just generally are a little bit more faster paced than previous Zeus teams, and I'm not sure if that's an adjustment from Zeus's mindset or just it's being forced because of the personnel he's working with. But whatever the case may be, they're a lot more dynamic than old Navi lineups that were just waiting until the last 30 seconds of the round to execute and playing a super slow map control default style of play. They still certainly can do that at times, but they're certainly a little bit more flexible on what they can do. And again, I think they've been doing a great job at leveraging Electronic more. And Simple is just probably the biggest playmaker in the game, most skilled player in the game, wild player, never know what the hell he might do, and so that's always going to be a nice little wild card factor for Navi as well. Obviously, though, some weak points when it comes to someone like Edward, who's more missed than hit. He's had a couple of cool events, but majority of the time, you can't really expect them to have too much impact, especially because a lot of the time he plays an entry role on some of these maps, and so when you don't have him clicking, that can be a little bit of a problem. But luckily, guys like Flamey Electronic and Simple's Op can still create openings for this team, which really kind of helps make up for the fact that Edward can sometimes be a little bit of a weak point. So now let's look at the head-to-head. Obviously, the most pressing result to talk about when it comes to head-to-head is Navi's 3-1 win over Big at Cologne, where they lost Dust 2, but they won Overpass, Train, and Inferno. They did also play each other at E-League Boston, but that was some time ago with different lineups. It was just the best of one as well, where Navi beat them on Inferno. And then there's some other shit, but that's from last year and really not worth looking into. When it comes to the pick ban for these teams, I think Navi needs to ban Dust 2 or Cash. They will likely ban Cash, just because that's what they usually ban, but they could ban Dust 2 just because the results on it have not been up to snuff, and we know how good Big is on Dust 2. Maybe they fancy their chances a little bit more on Cash. Either way, one of them is going to get left on the table for Big to pick, and that is going to be the way in for Big to get a map in this best of 3 series, in my opinion. If you're Big, you need to get rid of Mirage, but that means you're going to leave open maps like Train and Overpass, where Navi is one of the best teams in the world, and Navi is going to be favored on either one of those maps they pick against you. So each team, I think, can comfortably find a pick here that they should be heavy favorites to win and to force the third map. I think that Big will pick whatever's left over between Dust 2 and Cash, and it'll be a lock there, I think, or at least be a heavy favorite to win it. I think they should second ban whatever is left between Train and Overpass that Navi doesn't pick, just to try to get them a better third map later on. I think Navi should pick up either Overpass or Train, whatever Big doesn't ban. And I think they should second ban Inferno, because it seems to be one of their weaker points. They should hope to somehow get to another map, like Mirage or something like that, if it gets left around. They could maybe somehow still have Cash or Dust 2 as a second ban option if Big decides to go a different direction on their initial pick, so that could help them. And I don't want to get too jumbled here, but I think the point is that this map, or this series rather, has a lot of upset potential. It might be more of a 50-50 than people expected. I think Na'Vi is still a favorite, but I think a lot of people would have thought Na'Vi is like a 65-35 favorite or a 70-30 favorite, but I think it's a little bit closer than that, just given the fact that there is a weakness in the map pool that Big is going to be able to exploit in the best of 3 and get a map probably, and just how good Big's players have been so far at this major. If that form maintains and you still see people like Edward struggle and Zeus not be much of a factor fragging, then there's a way that, like, man for man, somehow overall the 5-man lineup could outweigh Na'Vi a little bit if you keep Smooya and Tabson playing well and matching people like Simple and Electronic, or at least close to them, and you're having your other players like Tizian and Gabi constantly beating out people like Zeus and Edward, then you might be able to leverage a little bit of firepower against Na'Vi. And again, I think there's a map pool exploit you could get there on like a Dust 2 or a Cash or something like that. So this could actually be a pretty close matchup. Obviously Na'Vi's favored to win it, but there is a lot more upset potential here than maybe people might expect at first glance, and so just wanted to throw that one out there. Obviously you probably got to take the safe bet in Na'Vi, but man, I wouldn't be surprised if Big at least force a third map and really give Na'Vi a run for their money based on everything and how it all lines up. Okay, so let's move on to Complexity versus MIBR, and we'll start with Complexity. And coming into the major, they obviously had a really great run at the minor to make it here. They won that minor. They, beat teams like Furia and Dignitas in the group stages. They were one of the teams that helped eliminate Energy from the tournament, and they wound up, beating teams like United and Rogue in the end to get the W. So really well done there, and I feel like that was the bright mark they needed to see an uptick in form, because coming into the minor, they weren't really doing a whole hell of a lot. There was a lot of events they didn't qualify for, like Starlighter Season 6 and the DreamHack Masters Stockholm. They had a really poor run at that Zotac Americas Finals where they got knocked out by Furia in the opening series. They went out in groups at DreamHack Summer and DreamHack Austin. They didn't even qualify for DreamHack Valencia, and there just wasn't a whole lot going on other than the fact that they were able to play really well online to qualify for DreamHack Summer, and they took care of business to make it to the minor, and then took care of business at the minor itself. So definitely some mixed results coming to the major, and I think that's what makes Complexity's run to the top 8 so neat of a story, just because I don't think you could really expect it based on what their offline results were coming into the tournament. And at the major so far, they've looked brilliant. They lost their opening game to Astralis on Inferno, which again, best team in the world. Complexity, not really the pedigree offline. But then from that point forward, they didn't drop any more maps. They went, 6 for 6 after they lost that opening map in the Challenger stage. They beat Space Soldiers, Big, and Vega Squadron in the Challenger stage. All those wins were on Inferno. In fact, all their games were on Inferno up until they played G2 on Cash and Big on Nuke, which they won those 2 games, and then they, of course, beat Fnatic on Inferno in their opening Legends match, and that's how they made it to the playoffs. As far as player performance goes, Stanislaw is tied with Simple for number 3 in the tournament for rating in the Legend stage. He's also number 3 in ADR, number 5 in kill assist, and kills per round. That's pretty damn good for Stanislaw. Like, he's definitely chugging along in this tournament and putting up some big numbers. But wait, we're not done yet. Shazam is number 5 in rating at the Legend stage. He's number 3 in kills per round, number 5 in op kills per round under Smooya, and Guardian, Device, and Kenny S. And then he's number 2 in opening kills per round. Then you go over to Android. He's number 10 in rating Legend stage. He has the lowest deaths per round, so that puts him at number 1 in that category, and he's number 5 in kill assist. Then Ye's in the top 15 in rating, and he's number 5 in rounds where he's gotten 1 or more kills. And then Def's also sitting up there in the top 20 for rating for the tournament. So they have a lot of individuals performing really, really well. You have Stanislaw, it's like a flexible rifler who can be all over the place. You have Ye and Def, who are a pretty good entry core. You have Android, he's kind of floating on the edge of the map but can make plays. And Shazam's AWP. They are all looking really on point so far this major individual form-wise. Again, I feel like Def has been playing well for a while, ever since they finally got an in-game leader on this team. Like, when Finesse was on the team, he was starting to pick up form. He's been playing really well ever since Stanislaw joined the team. I think for a while he didn't really impress me too much, but now that the team has a little bit more infrastructure and a little bit more leadership, he has really thrived under all of that. Ye has been exceptional. Ever since he got picked up, he's really developed well on this team. Android, I feel like, has been pretty good for them for a while. He was like always their most stable player, even through all the rough times, and he continues to be that. And then, yeah, Stanislaw and Shazam have added some firepower to this team as well. When it comes to map pool, a little bit hard to read, but they've certainly shown they can play Inferno well at the major and the minor. Their cache has also been pretty solid, and it seems like Mirage is something they've been really good with online, and they're pretty decent offline, particularly at the Americas minor. They use Mirage to a good extent. They don't really play Overpass. They had solid online nuke results, but not really their offline yet. Their Dust 2's okay, and their train has been good online, but not really played offline. So their map pool is a little bit hard to read, but certainly you could expect them to feel pretty good about playing maps like Inferno, Cache, and possibly even Mirage. Tactically speaking, they seem to run really well under the combined leadership of Rambo's coaching and Stanislaus' in-game leadership. Again, Ye and Def have been great with entering. The form's been there. Shazam's been fine with the op. And then, again, Stanislaus, I feel like, normally is more of a lurker, peripheral player, kind of support player. But then there's certain times where he can just entry into something and kind of try to set up guys like Ye and Def a little bit more actively. For example, if you look at their cash game against G2 at the major, you know, Stanislaus was playing outside B while Android was in the squeaky door, and the rest, like Shazam with the op and Def and Ye, were going for the entries like an A or mid or stuff like that. But then on certain executes, you'd see Stanislaus, you know, kind of mix in an entry, and even Android would sometimes jump into the mix. So they can be a little bit flexible with their roles. They can play a little bit of a looser style, you know, even when I saw them play like some of their other maps and other tournaments, they can sometimes be a little bit loose and a little bit wild, but I think they're pretty well composed, and they're, you know, working together well as a team, and they're developing well as a unit. And so I think that they're actually doing really well for themselves, and I think they're a team that's certainly been surprising at this major. But it's, again, similar to the story of Big, does that form on your players keep up against stiffer competition in a best-of-3 scenario when the pressure's on in a big playoff match where none of these guys have ever really been this far in a major? I'm not sure if Shazam actually with Cloud9 did anything better than this. I don't think so. So I think this might be the first playoffs for anyone on this team, and for some of these guys, it's their first major period. Like Ye, Def, Android. So definitely gonna wonder if the form will hold up against tougher competition. But now let's move on to MIBR. So with Made in Brazil, obviously not a lot to talk about coming into the major because they've only played 3 events together since Tarek joined the team, and they've established this lineup, and Yanko obviously only recently coming in as a coach. But to talk about the results, most recently at Marseille, they got top 8, where they were able to get through their group easily against Hellraisers and Mousesports. Granted, Hellraisers did not have Woxic in that game, but they did to Mousesports, and then they wound up losing to Astralis in the quarterfinals. Fair enough, Astralis best team in the world, MIBR just coming together, but they did play a really close game on training against Astralis in that series at least, so give them some props there, I guess. They won the Zotac Masters Hong Kong event before Marseille, where they did not drop a single map that tournament. They 2-0'd Flash, they 2-0'd MVPPK, and they 3-0'd Kingwin. They didn't even allow more than 4 rounds against Flash in the 2 maps, and they had some pretty dominant wins just throughout the tournament. Granted, they didn't really play anyone here. Flash is pretty garbage within the Asian region. MVPK has been pretty decent, but still not like a big name team. And then Kingwin's actually pretty good. I think they're maybe better than some people expect, especially after they won Montreal and they just looked good, like at the Zotac EU event, and just had some really strong players. So maybe they're a little bit better than people expected, but when you're looking back on this event, you probably wouldn't give MIBR too much credit for that win, but still, you know, whatever, taking care of business, getting the team together after a boot camp, getting some official match experience for the team to help them develop as a unit and get the teamwork going and stuff like that. So fair enough, well done. And then their opening event at E-League Premier, obviously they got beat out by Liquid a couple of times to get eliminated in the group stage, though they did have a win against Cloud9, but who isn't beating Cloud9 these days, it feels like. So, again, not too much to read from that. At the major so far, only played the Legend stage, of course. They won their opening 2 games against Mousesports and in G2 on D2 and Inferno. Both those were huge wins. Had a really easy time winning those games. Then they got blasted by Astralis on Dust 2 0-16. Some freaking throwback FACEIT Stage 3 finals at DreamHack winner in 2015 group stage against the front-runner on Dust 2, where they lost. That time it was Fnatic. So a little bit of bad memories, not the, you know, deja vu or the flashbacks you wanted, but then they were able to get the win over NIP in a very close best of 3 series. They won the opening map on overtime on Cash. lost Mirage, but then wound up winning Train, and that is how they find themselves in the playoffs. As far as player performance goes for MIBR, Fallen and coL are having a hell of an event. Back to their old standards, coL is number 5 in kill difference, Fallen is number 4 in total op kills, number 5 in opening kills, and then Fallen's actually number 1 in opening duel success. So when he takes an opening duel, he is the most successful doing that so far from the Legend stage, which is pretty interesting because I feel like he's kind of been more of a support factor on T sides, but maybe some of these opening duels is from his CT side where he is a little bit more involved on taking opening picks. Either way, both those guys are playing really, really well, and that's great. That's exactly the pieces you want to be getting back in shape for a tournament like this. Tarek's also been really solid, and then Fern2 have had their moments, and you know that the overall firepower of this team is pretty sound, and so you expect them to do pretty well going forward. When it comes to their map pool, again, they're a little bit hard to read because they haven't played together that much. But they seem really good on Dust 2 outside of that blasting from Astralis. Their Inferno looks way improved from what it used to be on older lineups back in the SK days. And their cash also seems really, really sound. And their train seems to be up to snuff as well from what we've seen so far, though they haven't played it very much. Overpass and Nuke seem to be their weak points. Tactically speaking, this team is coming together quite nicely from the demos I have watched. Again, I feel like on T sides, you're seeing Fallen take on a little bit more of a support role, kind of hanging back, maybe being more active in post-plant situations, or kind of sitting back, see if he can get easy kills with the op when his riflers are going forward. You know, for example, on Cash, he's kind of playing back while Tarek and Fur are a bit more of an entry combo, and you see like cold outside B and Stewie in the door, but they can mix in some really cool executes on Cash. I saw them do a really sick A execute where they had mollies like on Quad and MBK. They had like this 3 smoke wall by Forklift in the site. They really isolate the bomb site well, suffocate players that are inside, trade really well. And that's the big thing about this team is at a moment's notice, since they have so many aggressive riflers and usually one of Stewie and Tarek, if not both, or sometimes on the edge of the map, when they do go for an execute, they can just swarm and trade a bomb site with Tarek for and Stewie 2K, and then cold like being sometimes a factor in the mix as well. They have a lot of entry power when they do want to go for an execute. I think that's really what makes this team fun to watch and dangerous to deal with. I think the biggest thing is just figuring out how to get their default sharper when people are playing spots they haven't had to play previously in their career. And then on the CT side is where Fallen gets more active. It's when he gets more involved. He can take more opening duels. He can be more of a focus on the defense. Same with Dust 2. Dust 2 is a little bit different because it feels like, you know, Tarek and Stewie are more of the edge players, and now cold's more involved in the mid round. And then Inferno, again, like Stewie 2K is more of a factor because he's kind of the entry at B, so he's a little bit more active than say when he's playing door on Cash. So I think it's map specific on who takes focus on T side with rifling. But again, they are figuring it out. They have some cool executes. They're able to, you know, maintain Fallen's form while even being more supportive on the T side, which he wasn't able to do as well when he was kind of more of support for Phelps on the T side on that lineup. So I just feel like they're figuring out things better, and they're really flexible. And when they do want to swarm and trade a bomb site, they have a lot of entry power. And I think this is a team that is poised well to climb up the world rankings with more time and more practice and more official games under their belt. So when you look at the head-to-head now for the matchup to see who's actually going to take this thing, there's really no head-to-head history to talk about. Haven't really ever played each other offline, only some online skirmishes here and there. Obviously, all these players are familiar with each other. They all play in the same scene, probably scrimming against each other a lot, playing FPL or what have you. Certainly, some of these guys have played against each other when they're on different teams at different points in time in history. But there's really not a whole lot to hold on to for this particular head-to-head matchup as far as something to draw back to. Pick ban potential is going to be odd because neither team really plays Overpass or is quite good on it. And I think that could pose for an interesting ban situation where they could play chicken with each other and who wants to ban Overpass. So that's going to be what kind of makes this one fun. I think Complexity probably should be the one to get rid of Overpass, but they could also look to get rid of Train or Dust 2, just trying to banish strength that MIBR has shown. If you're MIBR, I think they'll just get rid of Nuke. The fact that Complexity has been pretty good on it online, despite their offline results not being there, is probably enough to scare MIBR away from wanting it to be played, unless they've been secretly practicing it and they're waiting to use it as a trump card in the playoffs. But you can never anticipate that. So I'd imagine that MIBR just ban Nuke, and if I'm coL, I'd probably get rid of Overpass or Train or Dust 2. I think Inferno is going to get played in this series, whether it's a third map or whether it gets picked. by Complexity or something like that. I think MIBR is fine leaving Inferno in the pool, even if Complexity's shown a lot of strength on it at the Major. I think MIBR has looked really improved on the map and probably feel comfy enough with it to leave it around. So I think we'll definitely see Inferno get played. I think that's going to be the map that decides the series, in my opinion. Whoever wins Inferno is very likely going to win the series. I just don't know if it's going to get picked by coL or something after the bans, or if it's going to get dropped until the third map. May never even see it if there's a 2-0 that happens, but I just have a good feeling Inferno is going to be left around the map pool somehow. If I'm MIBR, probably going to go for a pick on Dust 2 or Train, I would think, because I don't think they'll pick Inferno into Complexity, just knowing that Complexity can play it really well, but they're fine leaving it as a third map. I think they'll look for more of an advantage on a Dust 2 or Train. Could maybe pick Cash. We did see them pick it versus NIP in this tournament, and they did pick it against King 1 at Zotac. They seem pretty comfortable playing Cash, so I guess they could go for that as well. But you've seen them at times pick Inferno and stuff, so I think they're really flexible on that. And so that's where I'm going to kind of leave it. I think MIBR is certainly the favorite to win this series, but the way Complexity has been playing so far, I think they could take a map here. We'll have to see, but if I had to bet my money on it, I think you'll see MIBR take the series. Anyway, folks, thanks so much for tuning into this playoff preview. Again, this is just part 1. I'll do a part 2 for Liquid versus Hellraisers and Ashaz versus FaZe in a video the day after I release this one. So definitely stay tuned to the channel. Follow, subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll catch you next time.